Hey guys, Preston here. So today I just want to talk a little bit about sharpening choils and why they're important for your knives. So a sharpening choil is this little guy right here where they ground down the blade, this little notch. This notch is supposed to be covering the length of the plunge grind, right? And your plunge grind is just the end of the blade where it thickens up to the width it's going to go through the handle. And that's just the end of the blade grind right here. And there's the plunge grind on this knife, but the sharpening choil on this knife does not extend all the way to the plunge grind there. Excuse me for fumbling the words, I'm tired, it's late at night. But yeah, you can see how that sharpening choil doesn't go all the way to about here. If it went to here, then we'd get that whole length of the plunge grind, but it does not. So what happens? What's the downside of that? Well, you get a little bit of a beard. It kind of curves off there. And that's not really much of an issue, but it's hard to sharpen that beard, because if you're using a square stone where you put the knife down on it and you've got a high spot from that beard, then that means none of this area gets sharpened, while as this area and this area get sharpened. So you end up with a recurve. Slowly but surely you'll get there. And you can see this on a lot of knives, especially knives that people put through electric grinders. They come off like whoop, and then you got your edge going off somewhere. They kind of like come down a lot and then curve out. And that's a recurve, and those are just annoying. So yeah, that's an issue. And just see it clearly, the way the shadow is, where that starts, right there, and then how much of a beard we have. So if we picked up the little Lego here, I can show you, hopefully, the light coming through. There it is. That's because of that beard. So when your sharpening choil is not executed properly, you end up with a beard. Or if it's not executed at all, if they don't even have a sharpening choil, after a couple sharpenings, you're going to end up with a beard. Because as you're sharpening the knife with a big square stone, if you think about it, you're sharpening your knife. Watch this. Pick this point on the blade for reference, okay? Watch how much time that gets attention, right? So if you're just going like this on your blade, how much attention does the bottom of that blade get? It gets practically nothing. While as this part gets it for 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds, and then the heel gets like 1 second. Yeah. So, and then you're going back across this, so that gets like 8 seconds. So you can see that sharpening the heel of the blade takes special attention. You got to put it on the stone, a thin stone, or put only the pressure right there, and you got to make sure you sharpen that down so your blade doesn't start to curve down. Because if you're sharpening this part more than this part, you're going to end up with a recurve. So that's doing your best. And then having the edge get thicker right there at the end of that plunge grind doesn't help the matters. Now it's just deflecting your stone, so only this part and beyond gets sharpened by the edge of your stone until your stone comes down. So if you have a big, thick, bad plunge grind, you end up with this part being, this whole area barely gets hit at all. The whole width of your stone doesn't get much attention at all, and everything past it gets sharpened like 8 times more. So yeah, you get a bad recurve over time, and it just depends on how much you sharpen your knife. And sorry guys, I've got no notes for this. I'm just trying to talk and not just ramble, but that's not going to happen. So stick with me, guys. But yeah, you can see that clearly. Hopefully, if I can get this thing to line up, there's a little bit of a recurve starting in there. There it is. And if I move it down, oop, there it goes. It's gone. So it's just that beard. If they have moved that plunge grind or that sharpening choil, it would have fixed the problem. Okay, so you can see how it's happened on that knife. Now the Bark River didn't even come with one. The edge just came straight out, right? But it has a much sharper plunge grind than this knife. See that? So the Bark River isn't having the problem as bad, but it still ends up with the problem, doesn't it? Because this one didn't even come with a sharpening choil. Now I put a little bit of one right in there. I just rubbed that down onto the blade even. And still though, we have a little bit of a beard on this knife. Okay? You see that? If I move it past there, the beard goes away. Still kind of there. There it goes. So this whole area is the beard of this blade. It had no sharpening choil, but the plunge grind was executed really well. So the beard is much more gradual. You don't get a really sharp beard on the end like a bad plunge grind gives you. So this one's barely even noticeable, and you don't really notice until you put something like the Lego on there to show it off. But the beard is not a very sharp all of a sudden like on your Benchmade here. See, I'm going down this one, and there it is, gone, there it is. So when you do that plunge grind really well, like on this knife, and you do your best to keep it nice and tight there, you don't have such a problem with recurving. But when I got this knife, I should have gone straight ahead and put that sharpening choil in there. So then we covered this part of the blade, right? So with that part of the blade gone, then this wouldn't recurve, because you can get more attention with your stone in this area than you can the very edge. So anyway, the problem is not nearly as bad on this knife. A sharpening choil would have made it non-existent as a problem. But on this knife, with the big, long plunge grind, it's an issue. And you can just look at knives and tell how they're going to happen, or how this is going to happen. So if you look at a Mora knife, okay, if you look at a Mora companion, the blade just juts straight out of the handle like that, right? Nothing, no choil, nothing at all. So as you sharpen that down, you're not going to give that very edge any attention right down here. So it's going to start to recurve immediately as soon as you start sharpening the knife, and that's bad news. So if you get one, you would need to put the choil, and I don't have my stone laying around, but we can just use the Lego once again as your example of a stone. You'd want to put a choil at this angle, put it right about there, like this. So your blade kind of comes off and then starts. That way, like with this choil, if you're trying to cut something, your Lego gets hung up. With the choil I put on this knife, your Lego can still slide out of the choil like that, right? So if you put a choil that has an angle, if you do it manually, like this, and you make it a little bit longer, you don't have to worry about stuff getting snagged, because it'll run along the unsharpened part until it gets to the sharp part of the blade, and then it'll slide across and cut, right? So that's the best way to do it if you're going to put a choil on by hand. It takes time. You have to have a stone, or you can take your stone like, oh, do I have one? Oh yeah, my camera is being propped up by it. That's beautiful. So I can't use the stone, but we'll use this one as the example. So you take your knife, put it on there like this, and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until it gets to like there, right? And then that would give you nice, huge choil. It takes off an eighth of an inch off the bottom of your blade, but then you can really give that a lot of attention when you're sharpening. You won't get a recurve. It's no longer an issue. And guys, I know this video is really long-winded, but just, I don't know. I'm going to ramble. That's how it is. I'll try to cut it off at like 10 or 12 minutes. But yeah, you can obviously see, nicer plunge grind, you have less of a recurve problem. Like that plunge grind is super abrupt. But the problem is right there, that real shiny spot, is where I polished it with a very fine edge stone. The stone came down like this on the edge, so I could actually get in there and polish that. But last time I sharpened this, I sharpened it with this stone, and you can see the way this is cut right here doesn't allow me to get all the way to that spot right there. So then that gets unsharpened, which can kind of over time give you the results of a sloppy plunge grind, right? So eventually this one might start looking like this, unless I can get myself a different stone to sharpen with, or if I could sand off the entire edge of the stone until it ends up like that, or sand off the face of it until I get down to the fatter spot, which is actually probably what I'm going to have to do with this. Once I get that, I'm no longer going to have that issue. I'll be able to sharpen in there, but still, you're going to have less attention to that edge than you are the rest of the blade. I mean, seriously, think about it. Look at the surface area of the stone that crosses this point on the blade versus this point. Going across that, bam, bam. That gets sharpened a lot more than this does. So it really takes some special work right on that edge to keep it from recurving. But guys, recurving is an issue on almost anything, any tool, any knife blade. It's going to end up with a recurve after a lot of sharpening, unless it's something like this where you are able to sharpen off the blade like that on the bottom and the top. No recurve problem there at all. But yeah, guys, just want to talk about that a little bit. I know it's just a real long, rambling video, and just giving y'all a little bit of eye candy here with this knife. So pretty. At least I think so. Y'all probably hate it. It's gonna be like, this is the most beautiful knife in the world. Yeah, that's your opinion. But thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. And if your knife is new and it doesn't have a little choil on there, just go put a sharpening choil. Use anything. And I think my next video we're gonna talk a little bit about a burnt edge and what that is. Alright? So stay tuned. Thanks guys. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and God bless.